God is all-knowing. He is the most supreme. He is the maker of all things. He is the God that existed before anything came to being. And He is the ruler that never needed the votes of men or any creation as it were. He is God all by Himself. So what can ever be new to Him? What can ever be strange to a God who watched all things become reality? What can ever be hard for Him to comprehend? What is that thing that seems so impossible for Him? What could ever make Him confuse and wonder what solution would be given to a particular thing? I want to remind you of who He is. God is immortal, so He doesn't have a human mind. He doesn't even have the human brain. There are things He doesn't just have to analyze. At the sight of a problem, He sees the solution. At the glimpse of any challenge, He dictates the way out. So why worry when things go out of control? Why disturb yourself over little matters when there is a God that nothing can ever be new to Him? Why are you burdened when you begin to realize that things are not falling in pleasant places for you when there is a master that promised you that lines will fall in pleasant places for you? Psalms 16:6. Why are you troubled? Because your field is not yielding profitably, when there is a Father who promised that you are blessed even in the fields. Deuteronomy 28:3. I have good news for you. God is in absolute control of that situation that you're in now. Oh, I beg you, don't you ever think He has forgotten you? Don't you ever have the feeling of being neglected by God? I know things are not too smooth as it used to be. I know that the problem has been lingering for a while, and it seems as though it's not going to change. Can you brace up yourself this moment and tell yourself that my God will work things out? You see, one thing we always feel when things are not working out well for us as it should, we tend to feel God has forgotten about us, or God has chosen to close the chapter of our life. That has never been the case, and you should change your mindset. At a point in Joseph's life, things became very rough, to the extent of being imprisoned because of a sin he never committed. Imagine the height of tribulations he faced. This was a man that loved God, but he faced even the worst of trials. If it were to be a man at this dispensation, he would have just concluded that God hates him so much, or God has neglected him. His own biological brothers sold him off. His master believed the lie his wife told against him. Even the cupbearer that promised to talk to the king about him delayed for 2 years just to do that. All of this he faced, yet he still did not stop serving God. He put all his trust on God, knowing the fact that He will never fail him. The Bible did not record that at some point. Joseph began to lose his faith in God. Rather, the more these tribulations come to him, the stronger his faith, and the more consecrated he became towards God. He knew that God was not just going to abandon him at the place he was. He knew that at a time for a great shift was coming. He understood that it was going to be just for a while, and he would be transformed. You know the story, I believe. He came out of the prison and became second in command to the king in the whole of Egypt. Do you think during those times Joseph was at Potiphar's house? Or during the years he was imprisoned, God forgot he was existing? Or probably closed his file in heaven? No, God was planning the whole thing. It was His own idea, and it was His one great plan to elevate him and his family and to glorify Himself. God was working everything out right from the moment he went out in search of his brothers to the moment he was imprisoned. He does His things in ways we cannot comprehend. That is what makes Him God. Joseph would have just given up on God, accepting what was coming at him as his fate, and maybe told himself some things like, God has just chosen to punish me and let me suffer till I die. But no, he never had that thought. He always knew that a day is coming when all things will fall back in place. that even if everything is out of control, there would soon be a time when God will show up with his master plan and put everything in order, as it were. He didn't lose faith on the promise that God gave him through the dream he had. So hello, Ma Sir. Don't get worked up over that matter, over that heavy issue. Have your trust steady on God, stayed glued to the promise God has given through his word, and watch him settle all those issues. Have your mindset changed from today. Enough with those laments. Quit all those habits of saying, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" Stop harboring the thought that maybe God doesn't like you so much, or he doesn't care for you. Don't let the devil bring you down with those thoughts. Don't be deceived that God doesn't love you anymore. No, that is not true. You are a child of God. No father hates his own child. A father will always love his own child and would do anything at the interest of his child. Sometimes the child begins to feel as though his father doesn't love him. But that is not true, because his father does everything in his ability to show his love to his son. Most times the child will begin to feel very sad and unhappy because his father chastises him, and the child interprets that as hatred, which is not so. What is that thing that gives you cause to worry? Is it the work you do? Does it seem that anything you do doesn't seem to prosper or bring forth profits? Do you know that Deuteronomy 28, 1-14 spoke of all kinds of good things we're entitled to when we obey God? One of the criteria in receiving from God is obedience to his words. So when a man obeys God and he is at right with God, even when storms of life hit him, he has an assurance that God will not forsake him, because he has followed all God's instructions. He has kept his righteousness and has done what pleases God. So even if things don't seem to be in control, he looks to the mountain where his help cometh from. Let's look at the life of David before he became king of Israel. During the time he was running away from King Saul, who wanted him dead by all means, David should have been complaining to God, who decided to make him king instead of Saul. His life was on the line. He would have questioned God, but because he understood his place in God, he knew it would not continue like that. He didn't stop running from King Saul, but he knew it has an expiry date. He was aware that God will someday deliver King Saul into his hands, and all his days of hiding will be over. So I ask again, what do you think is too big for God to handle? Tell me that challenge that seems impossible for him to work out. It doesn't even exist. That which is too big for God to work out doesn't exist. Can you learn to trust this God more? Can you be less faithless and more faith-filled? From today, let your response to challenges of life utterly change. View that mountain in your life as a mere stone that can be used as a stepping stone. View that disappointment as a way of God telling you better things are yet to come. See that issue in your life as a holy way of chastisement from a Father who dearly loves you as his child. Let's see things happening in our lives as God's own way of lifting us and shifting us to a level of greatness. In most cases, God allows turmoil and terrible experiences our way because he is sharpening us for the height he is taking us to. He knew why he had to delay Hannah from giving birth, because he was planning to bring a great priest from her lineage. Everything God planned for happen, the prayers Hannah made were confirmations to God's plan. He needed her to make the prayers of giving her first son to the service of God. Don't be too surprised that if Hannah had her first son at the beginning of her marriage to Elkanah, she wouldn't have promised God to dedicate Samuel to God. Samuel was one of the greatest priests Israel ever had. He liberated them so many times and stood as a mediator between God and the people of Israel. There are situations we need not to question God. Remember, we don't know the end of a matter. He is the only being that knows the end from the beginning. So often at times we get carried away by the intensity of a problem, forgetting that we serve a God who is aware of all things, and nothing in heaven and under heaven, on earth and beneath the earth is new to him. We forget that he is the answer to all problems, because you think the problem is just too huge, or you feel he's very far away from you, so he can't even see what is going on in your life. Only if we can begin to see things in a totally new dimension, things will be a lot easier. If only we begin to think like Joseph or David. If only we understand that place where the Bible says, all things worketh for good for those who love the Lord. Romans 8:28 KJV. That job you lost is God saying, I have a better paying job than this. That children that are yet to come through you are still in the workmanship of God, because he wants them to be generals of the kingdom. Whatever the problem is, whatever gives you heartache, whatever the challenge may be, today I'm assuring you that God hasn't forgotten about you. It may tarry, but your answer will come. He is working things out in a bigger way for you. He wants you to be calm and let him handle things for you. All he needs is for you to fully trust him, to be who God wants you to be in this life. You must pass through all odds of life. You must go through pains so that when you finally come out of that challenge, the glory will go to God. You are born of God, so your mindset should be that of someone who knows his or her place in God. Job was blameless and upright. He was just too perfect. But God still let Satan tempt him with all kinds of tribulation and crises. Who can stand losing all he has in just one day, even your children? This was what Job had to go through. He was even afflicted and mocked in the society. God still remembered him and restored all he had, doubling it. When there is life, there is hope. When God is there, then all things will fall in place. God is in control when all things seem out of control.